Welcome to Media Watch. My name is Bob Lovgren, and the show, my guest, one of my co-hosts is Rob Raffelli. We talk here about the what's going on in the media and the topics that, especially the overall media, CNNs and all the newspapers in the country, basically, except for News Press, I guess, and the Washington Examiner and the New York Post, pretty much is that. We try to look at that stuff and see and get a little more of what we think about it, and that, where they're going wrong, really. Tonight we're going to have Rob's going to read off some subjects, and then we're going to talk about those subjects. We've gone to other things in my mind these days, so I gave him the show to line up the topics. Rob, it's all yours. What's the first one?
First and foremost, well, actually I want to do one little intro concept before the first topic. There's a phrase that we used in the 60s and early 70s. It was, there were hippies, yippies, and people who were basically nonconformist and wanted to live their life the way they wanted and be who they were. Yeah. And the phrase was, "Let your freak flag fly." Well, I like that, but I think that I'm seeing...
Run that again, freak flag
let your freak flag fly.
Okay.
And
there was a flag there? Okay, go ahead.
The concept here is, of course, it's degenerated because now people want to let their freak flag fly, except they don't want to acknowledge that they're freaks. They can be...
Well, that's true.
They can be completely off every spectrum, and I think they have every right to be.
Yeah.
And they also want to be regarded as normal, and for me to acknowledge them as normal, I'll acknowledge them as people worthy of respect because everyone is.
Right.
But I don't know why I don't get to chuckle a little at something so unusual and so outlandish and wild and colorful that...
well, instead of a flag these days, we have social media.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the bottom
anyway,
line. Now your flag can really fly.
Anyway, today the concept is, let your freak flag fly, but you will not admit that you're the freak that, look, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we would have said, hey, I'm a freak and I'm having a great time.
Well, the fact is, you go on social media, there'll be a lot of people there will agree with you. There are people that, and of course, well, I guess I'm not as freak as I thought I was, I guess, or something like that, huh?
Thank you for reminding me of some of my greatest experiences at science fiction conventions. I'm an unusual...
Talk about freaks, huh?
Yes, I'm an unusual fellow to some degree. I'm a little on the eccentric side. There were many a meeting that I went into. I went into lecture halls with 200 people in them, and I looked around and I said, my God, I am the most normal person in this room. It's a little shocking.
Well, maybe you weren't though. That's the problem.
I assure you that I was.
Yeah, you sure you was. Okay.
You had to be there. Okay, let's, now that we understand freaks and flags and flying,
okay,
and how we all probably have a little of it, and isn't that nice? Let's talk about our next freak, Kevin McCarthy, soon to be we think soon to be the Speaker of the House.
Right.
He's been the minority leader, and now that the Republicans have taken a small majority.
Right. Which, by the way, is the same majority that Pelosi did 4 years ago when she started. I'm sorry. It was in 2020. Mm-hmm. She lost a bunch of seats and so on. Then she had that slight minority, which is exactly the same. I think it's the Republicans got 220. That's what she had when she took over in 2020.
Like 220 to 218?
That might have been. I'm not really. No, I think it's that she lost a bunch of seats in 2020.
No, well, how many? What do you think the division is now?
Well, it's according to what I've been reading, the Republicans have 220 seats, and the Democrats have whatever's left over at this point. Although one guy who was a Democrat died already.
Well, I expect that person.
He was already sick, and he got elected, and then he passed away.
I expect that he'll be replaced.
Yeah, that's what happened. Of course, that's what happened with this. There was like 6 or 7 seats that were open because the person who was occupying had passed away. A woman that was killed in a car crash in Indiana.
Right. Yes, I remember.
And she was, I think she was a Democrat. Joe Biden was responding to her saying something about her, and is she here? She wasn't here. She's dead.
Right. Yeah. Well. Anyway, we
that happens. 435 people, most of whom are pretty old. Obviously, you're going to lose a few.
Yeah. In fact, let's look at just the House is 438.
435.
Okay. You're right. Okay, so it's 435 people in the House, and I don't know what their median age is, but I would be surprised if very many of them were under 50. So.
Yeah, well, there's some, of course, Clyburn from South Carolina. You run down the list. Some of these guys have been there for 30 years and so on, and they got in when they were in the middle age at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were.
And of course, they just get reelected constantly, reelected and all that.
Sure, in fact.
They average it out. But I think there's a lot of young people, too. It's probably more so than in the Senate.
Well, of course. You know,
Feinstein, is she 90 now?
Gosh, I don't know. I just remember a really, really, really long time ago when she was the mayor of San Francisco.
Yeah, right.
And that wasn't that right after George Moscone got killed?
I believe so, yeah.
George Moscone is someone whose hand I shook, and because I worked for one of his opponents.
Did that turn you off on Twinkies? Because that was the guy's defense. The Twinkie defense,
and of course,
was his defense.
The Twinkie defense has been eliminated by law since then.
Okay.
But F. Lee Bailey, I thought was masterful. I'm sorry about wandering off of media topic a little bit.
I got you off the subject.
But I'm going to touch on this. And that is that Moscone and Harvey Milk's killer, Dan White, was convicted. Twinkie defense meant that he didn't get his full premeditated murder. So he served out his sentence and he got out and later killed himself. So I think if you sort of skated, at least in that you didn't get the full murder conviction, and you've served your sentence and been released, and you still kill yourself, you're not a happy camper.
Something happened there. And you served the whole sentence, too.
He served his entire sentence.
He could have done it in prison.
Anyway, he could have done it in prison. He could have done it before prison. Anyway, I don't know what was going on in Dan White's life, but that man was not happy.
Anyway, I got you off the subject
that
you want to talk about. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I wanted to talk about was McCarthy, what we think his approach will be. Now, obviously, one of the things that he's been talking about, I think that he telegraphs his moves too much. Whatever it is you're going to do, whether it's mild or quite vigorous, you don't tell everybody beforehand.
Yeah.
Let them find out when you do it. So he's been talking a tough game, and I don't know if that's
actually talking about getting all this investigation of Hunter Biden and Afghanistan and the border.
Yes, and even if he's going to do those things, and some of them look like they're worthy of investigation.
Yeah.
In fact, I actually think that congressional investigations should be going on all the time because the government has its fingers in so many things that are important to us and often very obscure, that this is where one of my friends said of Congress, its informing function, finding things out and telling the populace, should be almost preferred to its lawmaking function. That it's important to know what your government is doing in your name and with your money.
Yeah, well, of course, they want legislation out of those finding out stuff about finding out about, and then legislation, appropriate legislation to do it, and so on.
Right, but you'll never know what's appropriate.
Never do it again in that. But I agree with you that I think that's what you're saying is you agree that they're biting off a big chunk all of a sudden. They don't even have power yet, basically, and I think that may, for the populace, the people, the voters out there, and so on, I think that's gotten a little old.
Well, what do we like to say? If you want to be judged as performing well, you under-promise and you over-deliver.
Yeah.
So that people look and say, "Wow, we got a lot more than we thought we would. This is great."
Yeah.
Instead of, "You promised me the moon and I got a piece of Swiss cheese."
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, I do. I mean, I've seen McCarthy talk about it, and yet he does talk about that kind of stuff. And so, of course, you have this Jim Jordan, which I really like him actually. But he's the head of this committee now. He's going to go after people and so on. He was supposed to be on the January 6th committee, but the Pelosi never let him on. And we'll talk about that too. But I think people want to see some things that could happen, you know, that find out about this you know, the border stuff and so on, and this and that and so on. And it makes a mistake of getting into trying to impeach the president.
Yeah.
that didn't get you anywhere to begin with. With the Republicans, didn't get the Democrats anywhere when they tried to impeach. Well, they did impeach, in fact.
They impeached Trump twice, including
the second time he wasn't even president.
Wasn't even in office. Anyway, I think one of the better ways to be taken seriously is to not act like it's a freaking circus.
Yeah.
So this is, whether it's the media covering it or Congress themselves, don't make it a freaking circus. Try to treat it like the serious business of the people that it's supposed to be. Of course, I'm not in that business, and these people are multimillionaires because of it, so maybe they're playing it exactly right from their point of view.
Quite honestly, what they could probably do, McCarthy could do, is get legislation passed that's very favorable to their program, whatever, and send it up to the Senate, who will be now still controlled by the Democrats, probably. And even if it got past the Senate, Joe Biden would veto it.
Sure.
Is going to veto it. So then you can put the blame on them. Because we had this legislation, it was okay, we funded it even. And because they're the purse strings, they handle the purse strings for the country.
Right, and so it's, at any rate, whether you're the Democrats or the Republicans, you want to, I would hope, cover yourself with glory by doing the right thing. And if the opposing party, whichever one you happen to be, the opposing party frustrates you, you can at least say, look, I did the right thing. And I've seen the Republicans do that and make mistakes. I've seen the Democrats do it and make mistakes. There's plenty of mistakes to be made, and a lot of ego.
Well, just the idea you pass some legislation that is favorable to so on. It's not going to be very partisan, I suppose. You won't get any other votes from Democrats, probably just because it's a Republican proposal and so on. But if you pass it, and there it is, you can take credit for it. And now the other part of the government, the Democrats, don't want it. They just veto. They either can't pass it in the Senate, and if they did, the president vetoes it.
Right. At any rate,
I think that works pretty well.
That, in a sense, you might think that the American people have voted for divided government.
Yeah.
Divided government. One of the things it gives you is less active government, because I always come back to the concept, when you look at how power has been divided in the Constitution, the founders did not have great hopes about the wonderful things that government might accomplish. I think that the founders were doing their best to limit the damage it would do.
That's right. They're trying to eliminate, that's why they had the division and so on, because they didn't want a king and a dictator or a Caesar or a czar or what's the guy's name, El Duce, to be the whatever he said was the law. Or she, in the case of Catherine the Great, and the other thing, and Queen Victoria for that matter. You know, that Queen Elizabeth, excuse me. Because by the time Victoria came along, there was the Parliament and so on. That's what they're trying to eliminate, and that's we have a division of power. People don't understand that we have two houses of Congress that can, and very often, are from two different parties, and then the president himself is connected to one of the two parties and so on, but he doesn't, he just can't pass any legislation he wants to. Ronald Reagan never had majorities in either house.
And yet he got legislation passed.
Yeah, he got legislation passed.
And he had a cordial relationship with even these people who disagreed with him, but he would talk to them about, well, what can we do that all of our people want? Because we can at least move ahead with that.
Yeah.
Now,
But of course, first Kevin McCarthy has to be elected Speaker of the House.
That's right. Of course. Do we know of any?
That seems to be a problem there.
Are there any other?
I doubt it.
Are there any other Republican contenders for Speaker of the House?
Well, I'm sure there are, but people that would like to do it. But the bottom line is they would have to get the same vote and so on, and that might be a little tough. And that you did mention the fact that he was a minority leader of the Republican Party, so he was the leader of the Republicans in the House, and still is for that matter, and so on. That automatically that makes him becomes the majority leader. Well, that's not true. See, the way they do it is If he becomes the speaker, then there's another person is the majority leader of the Republicans. But he's secondary to the speaker in this case to be a Republican, because the speaker, as in case of Pelosi, she and any speaker basically she can decide what legislation to that comes up at all. They can bury it real easy, and they do.
So I wanted to mention something about McCarthy and the January 6th committee, and that's the two Republicans on the January 6th committee were Trump haters. Now, funny thing about that is that ordinarily, when committees are appointed, the majority leader or the leader of the party in that house selects the people who are going to be on the committee from their party.
Yeah, right.
So Pelosi was in charge of who got to be the Democrats on the committee, and strangely enough, this is, as far as I know, possibly the first time ever McCarthy had two Republican congressmen that he wanted on the committee, and she prevented it.
Yeah, she didn't have.
She.
That's what I'm saying. A speaker has power.
It's I'm sure that McCarthy has a burn on about this, because this is a courtesy that has always been extended until this time, and I'm sure that that burns a little.
Well, she set up a precedent, because now McCarthy says, what's the guy's name from Burbank?
Oh, Adam Schiff.
Yeah, Adam Schiff and a few other people. There's another woman from, I've forgotten where, St. Louis or Minnesota, someplace, Texas. For the lady from, she's a Muslim, a Somali from Minnesota, and she's very anti-Semitic, and he's going to kick her. He decides, he's the speaker, and he decides who's going to be on the committee.
Yeah, you mean
the party may say that she can be on the committee, but the speaker says no, it's no. That person cannot be on the committee.
Right, and this is what Pelosi set up, because up until now, speakers of either party always gave the courtesy of committee selection to the opposition for their members.
Right.
So, and I believe you meant Ilhan Omar.
Yeah.
Anyway. It's. Oh, you're gonna be like that, is it? Mm-hmm. So, so very, very suddenly the shoe
established the precedent right there.
Yeah, very suddenly the shoe was on the other foot, and you may not like it. That's why we always say, hey, be careful when you're talking about, I'm going to get rid of the filibuster.
Yeah.
Or we don't have to give so-and-so the courtesy.
Right.
The time may come.
Pack the court.
Yeah, that's right. The time may come, and sooner than you think, when you'll
every 2 years.
when you'll wish that you had that courtesy.
Right, exactly.
So it's just, even as a practical matter, it's important to retain those civilities.
Although I agree that Schiff especially, he's a liar, and here he has to all the intelligence. He's on the head of the intelligence committee in the House, and something like that. Anyway, he's not going to be so easy to do. Anyway, we'll see what happens with McCarthy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, unless you can think of something else that that's on his mind, I want to at least talk a little bit about the red wave that we were expecting.
Yeah.
And by which we mean it looked like Republicans would take a lot of seats in the House,
right,
and maybe a few in the Senate.
Yeah.
And it looks like, and now they didn't. Mm-hmm. They succeeded. They advanced their cause, but not the way that we thought, and the way the polls suggested.
Right.
So, when reality doesn't start looking like your predictions, you have to at least say, well, reality has to be right.
Yeah. What happened?
So what happened to my predictions?
Yeah.
Why wasn't I right? So maybe next time we think a little more clearly.
Yeah. Well, that's was a surprise. I was right up there with the best of them. I said it was going to be a real bloodbath for the Democrats in the seats. And quite honestly, we did take seats. We took 4 seats, the Republicans, 4 seats in New York, in the state of New York. This is a turn from Democratic to Republican. It had a lot to do with the crime in New York City and that sort of thing, and that kind of thing. And the same in Florida. They took seats in Democratic-held seats that were, and they, by the way, I think they had one new seat there, which, by the way, New York had lost the seat because of this population.
Reapportionment.
Yeah, apportionment. And they got it. And Texas ended up getting extra people. And in California even, we took, I think, at least one seat. I think down in San Diego, a guy named Duarte has been elected to the seat. And they didn't lose any of the seats that Republicans did hold at the Kim in Orange County, and a couple of guys up in the San Joaquin Valley. I thought they could take them out too. They all won. And what's his name, Garcia, there in the Simi Valley, but it's in North LA County. He got in too. And I think a lot of it though has to do with just a beauty contest. Let's keep in mind in our system. Take for example in England or even Canada or places like that. The candidate for a particular office is chosen by the party. You cannot run unless you get the authorization from the party that you're in, that you can run for in England. I forget what they call it, the seat for the parliament. That's just like our districts and basically in that. But you can't do that. Not in this country. If you have enough money to pay and get enough people to put you on the ballot and so on, you can go ahead and challenge anybody you want. And that's of course what happens a lot of times.
Well, that's why we have Liz Cheney got knocked out in a primary.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's the one that was on the committee, by the way, Liz Cheney. So those of you that don't know that, what's his name? She's the daughter of Don Cheney.
Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney.
He was the vice president under W.
Yeah, and Wyoming. Who, by the way, he was the representative from Wyoming before he got to be famous as the vice president basically, and the Secretary of Defense too. Anyway. I'm just saying, it's kind of like a beauty contest. It's people want to see. For example, in Alaska, there is now Alaska elected a Democrat congresswoman there. In fact, she already was there in Alaska. As far as I know, the only Republican ever elected in the state of Alaska in any office whatsoever.
Only Democrat elected.
Only Democrat elected. And she not only won the runoff race a few months ago against Sarah Palin, but she now beat Sarah Palin again in the general election and so on. And as I was telling Rob, I think people just were tired of Sarah Palin. She had been elected governor of the state of Alaska, of course, but she had run her courses to fame and fortune and political stuff and so on. I think you may not. As I said this to you, Rob, I'd be sure her political career may be over. But then again, you never know. You never really know what's going to happen. And I think Republicans took a lot of seats. In fact, they changed 7 Democratic seats in the United States, turned from I think no more than that, like 13 or something like that. 12 seats went from Democratic to Republican, but the Democrats turned 7 Republican seats to Democrat, and the Democratic seats at the same time. It's a very complex process sometimes, and again, you elect a lot of, like I say, it's like herding cats. You never know what this person's been elected to a seat, he or she, and that they're going to be their own person basically, they're representing that district.
All right, I think I have 2 other things to think about in this realm. Mm-hmm. One is, I've heard people talk about this a bit and I don't know a lot, mm-hmm. is Mitch McConnell, the Republican
Senate leader.
Yeah, the Senate leader for Republicans.
In the Senate.
Yeah, he kind of controlled the purse strings for a lot of Republican campaign cash, mm-hmm. and it looks like maybe he was spiting Trump and making sure that he didn't fund people that Trump liked.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what he was doing, but at any rate, there was a lot of controversy about the way that he did or didn't hand the cash out for the campaign.
Well, he said he was disappointed in the quality of the candidates. That's what his expression was.
I'm sure some of them were disappointed in him.
Yeah, well, a lot of people now are, because a lot of those people lost.
And as an aside, I have disliked the man for 35 years.
Yeah. Okay.
But and he always gives me fresh reasons. And then every now and again he does something not too badly,
Yeah.
and you say, well, I guess he's got a little something going for him.
Anyway, the red wave just didn't happen, although the Republicans do have control of the House, and we'll see what happens from that point on. And of course, I guess I always tell people, this isn't this election, it's the next election. We're going to have another election in 2 years, less than 2 years now, a few days, less than 2 years. This will be for the presidency too. And the Senate, 33 senators, who, by the way, there's now over a lot, this is the last time around, there was a lot of Republicans. It was like 23 Republicans were up for office, three of whom who were retiring, so the seat was open.
Mm-hmm.
We lost the one in Pennsylvania. And that's a strange story right there.
Yes, it is. It's like Biden all over again.
Yeah, well, I mean, this guy's sick. I don't know if he's going to make it. He's going to make it the whole year. But they elected a Democratic governor in the state of Pennsylvania, so of course that seat will go.
And he had long coattails.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he won by quite a bit.
Yeah.
All right, well, just to wipe up the rear on the election, in Arizona, I believe Arizona has certified that Kari Lake lost. And
well, 2 counties in Arizona and one of the congressional districts have not certified.
Oh, really?
So we don't
Still
know.
not.
The congressional seat is and I think it's a Republican in that district and so on, but they have, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they have not certified.
Interesting.
Arizona had some problems.
Well, it had some problems in 20, and so here it is 22, and it's got some problems. I know that Kari Lake, who was the Republican candidate for governor.
Republican.
Yeah, that's what I say. She has not conceded, and what the heck, considering all the irregularities and stuff in the air, I don't blame her. And we'll see how it turns out. I don't feel, I think that anybody who believes that they have lost should concede, and anybody who believes that they haven't and has legal recourse should hang on and go through their legal recourse if they want to.
Yeah.
So if she conceded, I would say fine. If she doesn't concede, I go fine.
Yeah. Elections are messy processes. This is 300. I think I counted. What some heard sometime. It was just to elect these elections, and this is across the entire country for all elections, for everything, city council contests, service district contests, blah blah blah. There are 350,000 people working that night to count the ballots and do it, and the vast majority of them. My mother was a precinct guide or something like that. And she was a Republican in Chicago and a loner. And she worked very hard that night she got paid for it, and they worked very hard that night to count the ballots properly. They're very honest people most of the time. Joe Holland, who was the assessor and vote counter here in this county and so on, I believe it to be a very honorable person. He tries the best he can do with what he has and so on, but it's a tough. It's tough. It's really tough. So there's going to be some messy things. What did Churchill say about that? He says dictatorship. No, it says democracy, representative government is very messy, but it's better than the alternative.
Right. It's better than all the others.
Yeah,
it stinks, except that it's better than all the others. Basically, is what it came down to. He didn't say stinks.
Okay.
Gosh. All right. So we could. And I think we should find ourselves sloshing over into stuff like Musk.
Oh, Elon Musk. Fun to talk about him, isn't it?
So, and I like some of Elon, and I don't like some of Elon.
Yeah.
But
listen very carefully. He's not going to talk about cars or spacecraft or Twitter. This is something different.
Yeah, we could touch on all those.
Today.
But Elon Musk really, really, really wants there to be better communication between human beings and computers. And one of his projects has to do with coming up with ways to get implanted chips that you can activate with your mind so that you can, let's look at the nice interpretation. You have some handicap that keeps you from operating the computer, but you can think about it and the computer does what you want. That would probably segue into better, more easily controlled prostheses for people who are disabled or have amputations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a good side to all of that. Elon Musk also is sort of I believe it's a word for this, it's transhumanist. You know, there are some people,
Never heard that.
hang on.
Okay, yeah, I understand. I'm just saying.
Hang on. There's some folks think that they're going to achieve immortality not by being remembered, but by not dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand. I mean, what did Woody Allen say? That was his preferred immortality. They said, "What would you want people to say at your funeral?" They said, "How about, I think he's moving." Anyway, the idea here, if one carries it to its bizarro conclusion, is that people who are, let's say, aging and their physical bodies aren't going to make it, would transfer their memories, thoughts, and everything about them into a mechanical, into a computerized simulacrum, and they would live on that way.
Mm-hmm.
I consider this to be vainglory. I think this is just some sort of bizarre wish.
Yeah.
And that, as far as I'm concerned, even if we make a perfect computer simulation of me that can remembers everything that I do, acts as I would, and lives on when I'm gone, I'm dead.
Right.
I don't doubt for a moment that the robot thinks it's me.
Yeah.
And more power to it, whatever that is. But I believe that I personally would be gone.
That's the weird one.
Anyway,
Elon's got a thing to do that, and he's doing it. It came out today that I read that he's doing it with monkeys. That's what he's working on with monkeys.
It's even that repulses.
Kind of bad too, right?
Yeah,
that's got him a little trouble right there.
That repulses me a bit, but of course the alternative is experimenting with human beings, and even if they were giving their permission, if it's working out really badly, it's just not going to look good.
Right.
Anyway, it's something that he's catching some flack for,
mm-hmm.
of course, in the sensational press first. And I'll say again, there's stuff I like about Elon Musk. I like what he's doing with Twitter. I'm not sure how thrilled I am with Tesla. On the other hand, he showed that it could be done. Now GM and Ford and everybody else has an electric car, and so maybe that would not have come about without him.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, if I wore a hat, my hat would be off to Elon most of the time.
Yeah.
But sometimes I just say, who knows?
Yeah.
But as the richest person in the world and somebody who's done
by far,
yeah, somebody's done some really interesting things. Like he was part of PayPal. I think that was his first really big iteration into very large dollar net worth.
Right. Yeah. Right there.
So anyway, it all remains to be seen. But one of the things
we talk about a lot of stuff, that this could be. Everything goes to the cloud, and you say you're not there, but now just to be as I indicated, there's a chip in your body someplace, or your head, your brain, and it's recording all this stuff and so on. But it can be, as you said, it can be hacked. It can be people know what you're thinking. It comes out. It's in the cloud of what you're thinking at any given moment and so on. I don't think I want that to happen. I don't want people to know what I'm thinking, like right now, actually.
Yeah, I don't really know how hackable anything will be, but in general, I find that everything that can be messed with, somebody will mess with it.
Absolutely, so, we found that out.
Look, years ago, like at least 10 or 15, we were working on distance operating various parts of cars. Like there's an electric power steering.
Yeah.
And one version of the electric power steering.
What you're talking about is what you did for a living at one point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So one version of it is what we call drive-by-wire. Now, see, in ordinary power steering, you have a mechanical connection to the steering through the steering wheel to the rack and pinion that actually turns the wheel, and the power steering comes in a part of it that senses how much you're turning, and it applies additional hydraulic power to make that turn much easier. And in fact, when I was learning to drive on a 1965 Lincoln Continental, which, take it from me, is very, very heavy, my father knew that, you know, if you lose power, you may have to turn this thing without the power assist.
Yeah.
So he had me driving across a parking lot, and he turned off the key, and he said, "Now turn it."
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Yeah, you can turn it. You have to really,
I know, yeah.
really mean it.
That's for
Okay.
sure.
So that was the old version. Now with electronic power steering and drive-by-wire, there's no mechanical connection whatever.
Yeah.
The only connection is there's a sensor that can feel you turning the wheel, and then it applies the motors to turn the wheels of the car, and
Yeah.
there's no mechanical connection whatsoever. So all that matters at the end is what commands go to the motors and the power steering.
Yeah.
And when they started doing that stuff wireless, we found some people went ahead and showed that they could make that car do something that you didn't think it was going to do. So like turn into a ditch, for instance.
Yeah.
So and of course that gave us pause, and I'm sure it was revised. It's probably much harder to do now. But ever since then, I've always thought, I'm not sure how much I want to sever the connection from the thing that we're touching.
How did they make it go into the ditch without even having any power over the steering?
It has to do with, okay, when we say it's going to drive it by wire, that means that there have to be messages received by the computers that are operating the motors on the wheels.
Yeah.
And what you can do is you can fake the messages, or you can send overpowering additional messages
Yeah.
that if they're interpreted by
How are you giving him that thing, that voice?
It can be done wirelessly.
Yeah.
Okay. There are some tricks that would curl your hair, but anyway, there are things that can be done, and
it's not perfected, put it that way. It wasn't in those days. I'm not sure it is even today.
And whenever we build something for the first time, the first assumption that you make is probably not, now somebody's going to try to take this over and kill me with it. So you're just thinking, what's the nicest and most convenient, easy way to do this?
Yeah.
And that often turns out to be the most hackable. So once you've figured out how you want to do it, now's the time when you have to harden it so that it doesn't respond to anything except you.
Yeah, right, yeah. Well, that's a problem, obviously.
But here you are playing with it, and it's probably pretty vulnerable.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on.
Oh, yeah, Elon Musk has a bad, let's just finish it off. Elon Musk has this brain thing and so on. We'll see how far that gets and so on. You ain't putting no computer into my head, I can tell you that right now. Right. I don't want you to know what I'm thinking.
So one other thing though about...
I don't know what I'm thinking. Go ahead.
So here with Elon and Twitter, of course, some people are finally exiting Twitter because they don't like... See, I think of him as increasing freedom of speech on Twitter. Of course, some people think of him as enabling speech of a sort that they find abhorrent.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, here's the reason that I'm for free speech, even when it's nasty, is that I'm not sure there's anyone in the world that I trust to make good and decent decisions about who ought to be able to say what when.
Right, exactly.
And
there's always got to be some prejudice.
Yeah.
It's just people that they don't even know they have it, basically.
They don't know they have it, or they think, well, this technically would be freedom of speech, but people who are not as nice as even the speaker, maybe they'll take a cue. If suppose, okay, I don't have to be prejudiced against people of any gender, persuasion, whatever, but some people at least don't care for some of their stuff, and suppose the person said, those guys are pretty strange, I don't think too much of them. Mm-hmm. And well, then if you show, this person here in his mom's basement, he took that as justification to go down to, some nightclub full of unusual people and shoot them.
Gay people, yeah, right.
Yeah. So, first of all, I always think if you're not, everybody's responsible for what they do.
Yeah.
And there's always a price for freedom,
Yeah.
but you got to remember that there's always a price for non-freedom, and it's usually worse.
I think it's, and usually worse and so on. Well, let's just face it. It's we're living in a different era when people have, their soapbox is now the internet and so on, and they'll get, if you put something up and so on, you'll get thousands of people who agree with you or comment on what you're saying and so on. It makes you kind of feel important, I guess, to some degree, and all of a sudden you get to think well, a lot of people think the same way I do. Everybody thinks the same way I do, and that kind of thing. But that's just the way it is these days. You can get on the computer, Facebook, and all these Twitters and all these different places and so on, and say whatever you want. I always like to say to people, however, there's a freedom of speech, but there's also a freedom to listen. You don't have to listen to people that you don't agree with. Just turn them off.
Right, and you don't have to come over and slap them in the face to keep them from speaking, like you say.
Yeah.
Turn it off. Change the channel. I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
No, you have something there. Go ahead.
Well, the idea that we have that, like I say, the censorship and so on. Now you're saying, well, like the Zuckerberg, and this has been proven, and Twitter, they knock people off because they just don't agree with them, and they think it's disinformation. There's no such thing as disinformation. Anything's out there is information. It may not be what you think the information is, but it's something. Somebody's telling you something that they think is true.
About a week before the 2020 election, there was a big story breaking about the Hunter Biden laptop and all the stuff on it, which was pretty nasty. And somebody at Twitter and at other platforms decided to call it Russian disinformation. They were wrong. By the way, this included at least 50 former intelligence officers.
FBI.
And FBI, yeah, one of them was John Brennan. And lots of big names who all came out without having reviewed it themselves and with no information. They said, this is like Russian disinformation, we think it is, and they got it shut down and suppressed. Well, as it turns out, it was absolutely real. Everybody, including the New York Times, has admitted it since, and that in itself might very well have tipped the election to Trump easily, and they suppressed it. So it's one of those things where somebody's finger is on the scale, and
it could have been. We really don't know, but that's could be.
Okay. All right. So
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that tipping election is tough sometimes. You really don't know how. You don't know. When 150 million people vote, you're not sure exactly why they voted. I mean, they voted for Kennedy. A lot of women voted for Kennedy because he was good looking.
Significant numbers of Democrats, when shown the Hunter Biden stuff, said that might have changed how I would have voted. They, like 7 or 8% of them said, yeah, I might have voted the other way. All right. Okay. On to, speaking of switching channels, CNN. CNN is having some shakeout, some layoffs, a promotion for Don Lemon.
Yeah, right.
And
can I explain that one?
Yeah, I wish you would. Let's talk about
Don
these
Lemon
guys.
was he did have a primetime show. I believe it was 3 hours every night, just himself. And so he had complete control, visually on the set. He has been, he got a promotion, so he says at least. He now has a show that's in the middle of the night, and he has two co-hosts, two blonde ladies, who are on either side of him. He also changed his attire too. I think he shaved his head or something like that, and he's wearing not the normal suit and tie that he normally uses and so on. And he considers that a promotion for the show. And I think, quite honestly, I don't know about him, but it was announced just a couple days ago that CNN was laying off not all of their contributors, but many of them, some of whom were getting $500,000 a year for, it's going to save them a lot of money, and all of them in 3 figures. It's going to be 6 figures, which means over $100,000 a year as a contributor, which makes that, when you see this, you see that thing when they come on there, say a contributor. Fox News is the same thing, a contributor. And a lot of other things too, but CNN, I think and MSNBC have lost their ratings basically. People aren't watching the show In order to sell pillows, you have to have, to sell advertising, you have to have viewers. And they didn't have that, and so on. They tried to make CNN more nonpartisan. That's what they're saying, and so on. And that really gets me too. And Walter Cronkite, John
Cameron Swayze.
Yeah, John Cameron Swayze. Thank you. And others. The guys that did the Lerner and something or other on PBS. They had a
McNeil and Lehrer.
McNeil and Lehrer. And many others and so on. They were really newsmen. They read the news. They didn't have an opinion. They didn't say, I believe, or I think. I don't care what a certain, and that happens for Fox News too. I don't care what you think. I want you to tell me what the facts are, and I'll think about it. I'll think about those facts. I'm not interested in your opinion of this particular situation and that. That's not. This journalism stuff is way out the window. I'm a journalist. That's how I always say. No, you have an opinion. That's what that has. Anyway, Don Lemon is. We'll see how long he lasts. He made a career out of bad-mouthing Donald Trump. He has a house in Manhattan. He has a house on, what's the other one?
In the Hamptons.
In the Hamptons, and he has someplace
Florida.
in Florida. He's got some kind of condo down there too. He bought, and he made money up because he was had that show, and he lost Donald Trump as the president and so on. They took him off of Twitter so he couldn't communicate, which I'm not so sure was a bad idea really for Donald Trump. He kept his mouth shut. They'd be a lot better off. Yet I didn't have to have an opinion on every subject, put it that way. Anyway, it's funny about the news. And Fox News, of course, has not laid off anybody. They have the best viewership of any of the cable networks. In fact, probably even of some of the networks, CBS, NBC, and ABC.
So there's something about the viewership that I got a kick out. I follow a few guys on YouTube. One of whom is a fellow who's usually not very serious, although he writes serious books and he can address serious subjects. But his name is Mark Dice, probably Schuldice, I think. But anyway, Dice is a good name for a YouTuber. Anyway, what he was pointing out on several occasions, he was kind of clashing with Brian Stelter, who was a CNN contributor or whatever. He had something called Brian Stelter's Reliable Sources, and of course they were not reliable. But when they clash, he's saying, I have as big an audience as Brian Stelter, and I'm doing this from the table in my kitchen.
There you go. Right.
How about that?
Yeah.
So, and Brian Stelter was moved over to CNN Plus, and then CNN Plus had its plug pulled.
Yeah.
So I think you can probably find him online somewhere. I just haven't sought him out. I was wondering, have you encountered little Brian? But one of the keys to the enjoyment of Brian Stelter, I actually enjoyed Brian Stelter much more with Mark Dice doing him. Mark would literally play a segment, except he would put his voice over Brian Stelter's. Now, Brian Stelter, for a man, is somewhat high-pitched in voice, and thing is, Mark read his words and lip-synced him perfectly. He was not changing what he said. It was just he was making, I can't believe that Mr. Trump is so unserious. This is a republic we're talking about. So he basically gave him a Mickey Mouse voice.
Okay.
And it was so much fun. There were all these people on the regular news who said, I can't see Brian Stelter without hearing Mark Dice in my head now.
Right. But there again, I guess, because of social media, you can have a TV show. We're doing a show here, and it's going to be going, and to anybody. We have had, that we have much response. Although I ran into a guy the other day, he said he watched the show. He enjoyed the show here locally. At any rate, and we don't have anywhere near the audience with the Twitter and all the different things, our own YouTube channel and so on. But you can get.
I'll have to ask my fan.
Yeah, guys can be made famous very quickly. Very quickly. So, well, we got about 11 minutes and 10 minutes to go, so pick one out that
let's think about Bob Iger. Okay, so Bob Iger has just been put back in as CEO at Disney.
Yeah, now, right. Yeah.
So Disney, there was another Bob who was the CEO in between, but it was Bob Iger, Bob I forget, and now Bob Iger again.
Yeah.
And Disney has been kind of championing LGBTQ, etc. community, and bully for them. My only problem with them ever is when they lie in the process.
Yeah.
Even Bill Maher, who is basically, he's pretty liberal. He said, "Well, you guys called their education reform the Don't Say Gay bill," and of course it isn't. And he said, considering what they were trying to do with it, it could just have been called the Let's Teach Like We Did 5 years ago bill. So anyway, it was nothing too harsh, but at any rate.
Well, the Disney's, I guess somebody heard that they couldn't say boys and girls anymore.
Now it's going to be
in the studio. They had to say, I don't know what they would say.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Frankly, I'm not offended by the change. It's just that boys and girls wasn't too terribly offensive either. Anyway, what Iger has said is, and he hasn't, I think, come out and exactly apologized, but he's been telling the Disney people, you really need to respect the community more.
Yeah.
And he says, if they're telling you this is what they want, then keep it in mind.
Yeah.
Especially now, they keep putting out stuff where parents find out in advance what kinds of stuff a Disney presentation is going to have, and they say, well, they have one now. It's called something like Strange World. I don't know what it's called exactly, but there's a new animated movie, and apparently it's got non-standard genders in the leads, and they're doing some open affection display. Again, not troubling me, but it turns out not every parent wants that for their 5-year-old.
Right.
And they're staying away in droves.
Yeah, right.
And so basically, Iger is saying,
talk about it.
Do us a favor. Yeah. Don't chase the customer away.
Yeah, I mean, Disney is an iconic in the world, basically.
Absolutely.
Animation. So they made a movie. It was automatically. I always remember this woman that when they had the VHS tapes and so on, it was the Tarzan movie they made. It was a Disney movie, and this woman that was managing an apartment for me, she had her kids, and they showed this Tarzan movie in their living room all the time. The little couple of kids that they had, pretty young, and it was they watched it constantly. And somebody told me that sold 17 million copies of that VHS tape. Why? Because it was a great babysitter.
Absolutely, and his friends with kids told me, he said, get a tape you like, because you're going to be seeing it a lot.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Your child may watch that tape
in the car
30 times or more.
Yeah, and then to wreck that, the stock has gone under 100 now. I know it is. And it used to be it was like buying IBM or Apple stock. This is going to be around a long time. Well, they wrecked it. Well, hopefully they have not. I'm sure there'll be a lot of the Marvel Comics. We talked about that too. They also operate that too, don't they?
Yeah,
they changed that. The Marvel Comic. We talked about that before.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
I want to.
One more thing. You got 4 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I want to just fling up a couple of images and then.
Ooh, what's this?
Let's get a good look at these images. What's interesting about?
Can you push in, Mike?
What's interesting about these guys with the face paint is that they found that automated facial recognition doesn't work with this. Somebody noticed, first of all, that her Apple here, I think it's probably this one here, noticed that her Apple phone facial recognition unlock wouldn't unlock for her when she had her Juggalo face paint. So I thought, well, I think people may start wearing this stuff in public if they don't like the idea of being identified by facial recognition everywhere you go, so that they say, well, let's see, they went into Bloomingdale's, and then they went down here into Starbucks, and then because they're compiling your shopping habits so that you can be sold to others.
Of course, that might be a good security thing too. If somebody walks around like that into a crowded place and so on, and you can't get facial recognition of them, you want to stop them right up and frisk them to see if they're carrying any weapons.
Could be. I'm going to pop through my images just to see if I happen to like this. This is a commentary about people who demand that you get a vaccine. We say they're brave enough to inject unknown substances into their veins, but they're afraid to breathe air. But anyway, this is great. This is part of the Biden administration. This is Sam Brinton, they, them, and Sam Brinton is in the Department of Energy, specifically dealing with the disposition of spent fuel and nuclear waste. And I'm always interested to see who's in the administration. And this one too is in the administration. She's in education. This is Caitlin Curtis, and she thinks that that the churches promote white supremacy and that a reckoning is coming, and she's all heavily anti-racist, and she wants. Oh, and she also, but you won't surprise you that she is both a woman of poundage and it believes that fat phobia is real and is rooted in white supremacy.
Controversial opinion,
oh,
but if you have
this gal, you got,
and you're hanging out with your friend group of color, you need to ask permission from everybody in the group to bring your white friend. Like, don't just bring them. Ask for explicit permission from everyone. Because just because you're comfortable with them doesn't mean that everybody's comfortable with them. I might not be in the mood to deal with white shenanigans that day.
Anyway, sort of explicitly racist. See, the things that you and I do, well, yeah. At least me, white shenanigans.
Yeah, white shenanigans.
Yeah, and as one knows, white shenanigans are inherently suspect. Who knows what we might be doing to non-whites, and I'm sure they don't have any shenanigans.
Incredible. I mean, my God.
And I want to get to
how about just don't recognize them as this colored or of different ethnicity and so on. Just a person that you can talk to. Forget about how they're dressed and so on.
The last visual I want to do actually is this. It's comedy, and it's literally.
You got about a minute.
Okay, well I think I can squeeze this in. Let us open with. This is a Thai commercial. I can't believe that I made it that small. I did this right earlier. I guess I'm going to leave it alone in case we can see it. The bank here would like you to subscribe to their auto pay so you don't accidentally do things like forget to pay the phone bill. And of course, just a little earlier, her husband was going to prepare a fish, but he forgot to pay the light bill. Got a mess. He would like to wash up, but he
didn't pay the water bill.
Forgot to pay the water bill. So,
got to see this. Call us, and email address is on the screen. We can show it on our